Please, don't hurt me. I can't walk, begged the female CEO. Then the single Korean dad changed everything. Before we begin the story, leave a comment and let us know which city you're watching from and enjoy the story. The rain was coming down in sheets that October evening in Seattle, turning the sidewalks into rivers and making the city lights blur like watercolors. Min Ji-woo had just left the most humiliating meeting of her life, her hands trembling as she clutched her briefcase, her power suit soaked through within seconds of stepping outside the glass tower that housed Min Enterprises. She'd built her company from nothing, turned it into a tech empire worth $200 million, and now it was all crumbling because of one man's betrayal. Her own brother had been embezzling millions, and the board had just voted her out as CEO. The woman who'd graced the cover of Forbes, who'd been called the most innovative entrepreneur of her generation, was now persona non grata in her own company. The doctors had been clear about her diagnosis. Multiple sclerosis was unpredictable, they said. Some days would be good, others would be challenging. But tonight, after the stress of losing everything she'd worked for, her body was failing her in ways that terrified her. Her legs, which had carried her through boardrooms and onto stages where she'd inspired thousands, now felt like they belonged to someone else. Each step sent shooting pains up her spine, and she could feel her left leg beginning to drag. She needed to get to her car, needed to get home, needed to disappear before anyone could see Min Ji-woo, the Iron Lady of Silicon Valley, falling apart on a public street. That's when she saw him. Park Hyun-woo was loading the last of his catering equipment into his van after a long day at a corporate event. The 34-year-old single father had been running his small Korean fusion catering business for 3 years, ever since his wife, Lee So-young, had died in a car accident, leaving him to raise their 8-year-old daughter, Park Da-yoon, alone. He was exhausted, his back aching from bending over warming trays all day, his chef's jacket stained with kimchi and bulgogi sauce. But he noticed the woman immediately. She was trying to walk normally, but even through the rain, he could see she was in distress. Ji-woo was 20 feet from her car when her legs simply gave out. She hit the wet pavement hard, her briefcase skittering across the sidewalk, papers scattering in the wind like white birds fleeing a storm. The pain shot through her body like lightning, and for the first time in her adult life, Min Ji-woo, the woman who controlled billion-dollar deals with a nod of her head, was completely helpless. "Please!" she gasped as Hyun-woo approached, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Please, don't hurt me! I can't walk!" The words escaped her lips before she could stop them, raw and vulnerable in a way that shocked them both. She'd meant to say she couldn't get up, couldn't stand, but what came out was the truth that had been terrorizing her for months. Some days, her body simply refused to obey her commands. Hyun-woo knelt beside her without hesitation, his voice gentle despite the chaos of the storm around them. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Hyun-woo. Can you tell me your name?" His Korean accent was slight but warm, and something about his tone, calm and steady, like a lighthouse in a hurricane, made Ji-woo's panic subside just enough for her to think clearly. "Ji-woo," she whispered, rain streaming down her face, mixing with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. I can't get my legs to work right now." She expected judgment, pity, or worse, recognition, but Hyun-woo simply nodded as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "Okay, Ji-woo, I'm going to help you get somewhere warm and dry. Is that your car over there?" She nodded toward the sleek black Tesla parked at the curb. "Are you hurt anywhere else? Did you hit your head when you fell?" His hands moved carefully, checking for obvious injuries without invading her space. Ji-woo realized he was treating her with the same gentle competence she'd seen nurses use with patients. "I have MS," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Multiple sclerosis. Sometimes my legs just stop working. The stress today, losing my company, it triggered a flare-up, and I thought I could make it to my car, but..." She trailed off, mortified by her own transparency. Hyun-woo's expression didn't change. No pity, no discomfort, just understanding. "My grandmother had MS," he said quietly. "I know it's unpredictable. Would it help if I carried you to your car? Or would you prefer to wait here while I bring it closer?" The fact that he gave her choices, that he treated her like she still had agency over her own body, made Jiwoo want to cry all over again. "Could you help me to my car?" she asked, her voice steadier now. "I don't think I can drive, though. Could I call someone?" Hyunwoo was already shaking his head before she finished the question. "I'm not leaving you alone in a car in this storm when you're having a medical episode. Where do you live? I'll drive you home." "You don't understand," Jiwoo said, as Hyunwoo carefully lifted her, his arms strong and sure from years of hauling catering equipment. "I live in Medina. That's like a 40-minute drive from here, and then you'd have to get back to wherever you need to be. I can just call a rideshare or—" "No," Hyunwoo said firmly, settling her into the passenger seat of her Tesla with surprising gentleness. "You're not getting in a car with a stranger when you're vulnerable. And I'm not a stranger anymore. I'm Hyunwoo. I own So Young's Kitchen Catering. I have an 8-year-old daughter named Da-Yoon, who's currently at her best friend's house having a sleepover. And I was planning to spend the evening watching Korean dramas and eating leftover bulgogi anyway. Your evening just became more interesting than mine." As Hyunwoo adjusted the driver's seat and familiarized himself with the Tesla's controls, Jiwoo studied his profile. He had kind eyes, she noticed, and laugh lines that suggested he smiled often despite whatever sadness she could sense lurking beneath the surface. His hands were scarred from kitchen work, nails short and practical, and he moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to taking care of others. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as they pulled into traffic. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." Hyunwoo glanced at her, and for a moment, his careful composure slipped. 3 years ago, my wife was driving home from her sister's house when her car broke down on I-5. It was raining just like tonight. She was 8 months pregnant with our second child. His voice caught slightly. "She called me, said she was scared, said she couldn't get the car started. I told her to stay in the car, that I was coming to get her, but she was worried about blocking traffic." Jiwoo felt her chest tighten. "A drunk driver hit her while she was standing next to her car, trying to flag down help. She and our baby died instantly." The car fell silent, except for the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. "For 3 years I've wondered what would have happened if someone had stopped to help her, if someone had made sure she was safe, if someone had just been kind." "I'm so sorry," Jiwoo whispered, and Hyunwoo nodded, his jaw tight with the effort of keeping his emotions in check. "So when I see someone who needs help, someone who's scared and vulnerable, I stop. Because maybe it won't bring So Young back, but maybe it means someone else's So Young makes it home safe." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the windows as they headed toward the upscale suburb where Jiwoo lived. She found herself studying Hyunwoo's hands on the steering wheel, the careful way he navigated the unfamiliar car, the subtle way he kept checking to make sure she was comfortable. When they finally pulled into her driveway, a sprawling modern home overlooking Lake Washington, Hyunwoo let out a low whistle. "Wow," he said simply, and Jiwoo felt a flush of embarrassment. The house had been featured in Architectural Digest, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, but tonight it just looked cold and empty. "It's too big," she said quietly. "I bought it thinking I'd fill it with a family someday, but now it's just me, rattling around in 6,000 square feet." Hyunwoo turned off the car and looked at her seriously. "Can you walk now, or would you like me to help you inside?" Jiwoo tested her legs tentatively. The feeling was returning, but they still felt weak and unreliable. "I think I need help," she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. Hyunwoo came around to her side of the car, lifting her again with the same careful respect he'd shown outside the office building. As he carried her up the front steps, Jiwoo caught a scent that was distinctly him, something warm and comforting that reminded her of the Korean restaurants her college roommate used to take her to. "Do you have someone who can stay with you tonight?" Hyunwoo asked as Jiwoo fumbled with her keys. "Someone who can help if you have another episode?" Jiwoo's hands stilled on the lock. The truth was, she didn't. Her assistant would stay if asked, but that felt too much like making her medical condition someone else's job. Her brother, the only family she had left, was now her enemy. Her few close friends were scattered across the country, building their own empires and raising their own families. "I'll be fine," she said automatically, but Hyunwoo was already shaking his head. "That's not what I asked. I asked if you have someone who can stay with you." When Jiwoo didn't answer, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'm staying," he said simply, "just until tomorrow, just to make sure you're okay. I'll sleep on the couch, and I'll leave first thing in the morning." "You can't do that!" Jiwoo protested, even as relief flooded through her. You have a daughter, you have a business, you have a life. You can't just put everything on hold for a stranger. Hyunwoo helped her settle onto her living room couch, then knelt down so they were at eye level. Jiwoo, 3 hours ago, we were strangers. Now you're the woman who trusted me enough to tell me about your illness, to let me drive your car, to bring me to your home. That makes you not a stranger anymore. What does that make me then? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hyunwoo smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him all evening, and it transformed his entire face. That makes you someone worth staying for, he said simply. Besides, Da-yoon's not coming home until tomorrow afternoon. My restaurant is closed on Sundays, and I make a mean Korean breakfast. When's the last time you had homemade kimchi jjigae? I don't even know what that is, Jiwoo admitted, and Hyunwoo laughed, a sound so warm and genuine that something inside her chest began to unknot for the first time in months. Then you're in for a treat, he said. But first, let's get you settled. Have you eaten anything today? Jiwoo thought back to her morning, which felt like it had happened in another lifetime. Coffee, she said finally. Just coffee. Hyunwoo disappeared into her kitchen, and Jiwoo could hear him opening cabinets, the sound of running water, the gentle clink of dishes. She closed her eyes and tried to process what had happened. This morning, she'd been the CEO of a major corporation. Tonight, she was unemployed, potentially disabled, and being cared for by a Korean single father who made her feel safer than she had in years. Hey, Hyunwoo's voice was soft. I made you some tea and I found some crackers in your pantry. It's not much, but you should get something in your stomach. He set a steaming mug in front of her, and Jiwoo realized it was her good china, the set she never used because she never had anyone to use it with. This is beautiful, Hyunwoo said, running his finger along the delicate rim. My grandmother had a set like this. She only brought it out for special occasions. It was my mother's, Jiwoo said, accepting the mug gratefully. She died when I was in college. I keep meaning to use it more, but it always felt too precious for every day. Hyunwoo settled into the chair across from her, his own mug cradled in his scarred hands. So, Young used to say that every day we're alive is a special occasion. She'd make me use the good dishes even for leftover takeout. His smile was soft, but tinged with sadness. She was right, you know. Life's too short to save the good stuff for someday. They talked until almost midnight, their conversation meandering through topics both light and profound. Hyunwoo told her about Da-eun, how she'd inherited her mother's artistic talent and her father's stubborn streak, how she painted elaborate murals on her bedroom walls and insisted on packing kimchi in her school lunch even though the other kids thought it was weird. Jiwoo found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone about the loneliness of success, about watching her friends pair off and start families while she climbed corporate ladders, about the terror of losing control of her own body. Do you know what the hardest part is? She asked as Hyunwoo covered her with a throw blanket he'd found in the hall closet. It's not the physical symptoms. It's the unpredictability. I built my entire life on being in control, on being able to predict outcomes and manage variables. MS doesn't care about my 5-year plans. Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. When So Young died, I had to learn that the only thing I could really control was how I responded to things I couldn't control. Some days, I do better at it than others. He tucked the blanket around her shoulders with the practiced care of someone who'd spent years taking care of others. But I've noticed that the days I focus on taking care of someone else, even in small ways, those are the days I feel most like myself. Is that why you stayed tonight? Jiwoo asked. To feel like yourself? Hyunwoo considered this seriously. Partly, he admitted, but mostly I stayed because leaving you alone felt wrong. And because selfishly, I haven't had a conversation like this in a very long time. Da-yoon's wonderful, but 8-year-olds aren't great at discussing existential philosophy. Jiwoo laughed, and the sound surprised her. I haven't laughed in weeks, she said wonderingly. I'd forgotten what it felt like. Hyunwoo smiled. Laughter is like crying. Sometimes you need to do it even when it doesn't feel appropriate, especially then. The next morning, Jiwoo woke to the smell of something incredible cooking in her kitchen. For a moment, she was disoriented, alone in her bed, with no memory of how she'd gotten there. Then she remembered Hyunwoo carrying her upstairs, settling her under her own covers with the same gentle efficiency he'd shown all evening, promising to wake her if she needed anything. Her legs felt stronger this morning, the episode having passed as mysteriously as it had begun. She made her way downstairs slowly, following the incredible aromas that filled her house. Hyunwoo was standing at her stove, wearing an apron he must have found in one of her drawers, his hair slightly mussed from sleep. He looked younger in the morning light, less burdened, and Jiwoo realized she was seeing him in his element. "Good morning," he said, turning to smile at her. "How are you feeling?" Jiwoo tested her legs, taking a few experimental steps. "Better, much better. What are you making?" "It smells incredible." Hyunwoo gestured to the array of dishes he'd prepared. "Parkji jjigae, like I promised. Also rice, some banchan I made from what I found in your fridge, and Korean-style scrambled eggs. I hope you don't mind that I took some liberties with your kitchen." "Mind?" Jiwoo stared at the spread he'd created. "This looks like something from a restaurant. I can't even make cereal without burning it." Hyunwoo laughed. "Cooking is my love language, I guess. So, Young used to say I couldn't express an emotion without feeding someone." He ladled the kimchi stew into bowls, the rich, spicy broth making Jiwoo's mouth water. "Try this," he said, handing her a spoon. "But be careful, it's hot." The first taste was a revelation. Spicy, savory, complex layers of flavor that warmed her from the inside out. "Oh my God," Jiwoo said, her eyes widening. "This is incredible. How did you learn to cook like this?" Hyunwoo settled across from her at the breakfast bar, his own bowl steaming in front of him. "My grandmother taught me when I was Da-eun's age. She said cooking was how our family survived everything: war, immigration, starting over in a new country. Food was love, memory, home. And now you're sharing it with a stranger," Jiwoo said softly. Hyunwoo met her eyes across the breakfast bar. Not a stranger anymore, remember?" They ate in comfortable silence, Jiwoo savoring not just the incredible food, but the feeling of being cared for, of not being alone in her too big house. When they finished, Hyunwoo began clearing the dishes despite her protests. "You don't have to clean up," Jiwoo said, following him to the sink. "You've already done too much." Hyunwoo shook his head. "My grandmother also taught me that you never leave someone's kitchen messier than you found it. Besides, I like cleaning. It's meditative." Jiwoo watched him work, noting the easy efficiency with which he moved, the way he seemed to instinctively know where everything belonged in her kitchen. "Hyunwoo," she said quietly, and he turned to look at her, dish towel in hand. "Thank you. For last night, for this morning, for everything. I don't know how to repay you." Hyunwoo dried his hands carefully, then turned to face her fully. "You don't repay kindness, Jiwoo. You pass it forward. Someday, when someone else needs help, you'll be the one who stops." They stood there for a moment, the morning light streaming through her floor-to-ceiling windows, and Jiwoo felt something shift inside her chest. This man, this gentle stranger who'd appeared in her life during her darkest moment, had shown her a kind of care she'd forgotten existed, not because she was successful or powerful or useful, but simply because she was human, and she needed help. "I have to go pick up Da-eun," Hyunwoo said finally, glancing at his watch. "But before I do, I want to give you something." He pulled out his phone and handed it to her. "Put your number in there, not because you owe me anything, but because I want to know you're okay. And because maybe if you want, we could do this again sometime. The breakfast part, I mean, without the medical emergency." Jiwoo input her number with trembling fingers, not from illness this time, but from something else entirely. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "I'd like that very much." Hyunwoo smiled, that transformative expression that had already become precious to her. "Good, because Da-eun's been asking when I'm going to cook for someone other than her, and I have a feeling she'd like you." After Hyunwoo left, Jiwoo stood in her kitchen, still smelling the lingering aromas of the breakfast he'd made, still feeling the warmth of genuine human connection. She thought about the board meeting yesterday, about losing her company, about all the things that had felt like the end of the world just 24 hours ago. They still hurt, but they no longer felt insurmountable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hyunwoo. "Made it home safe. Da-eun wants to know if the lady who likes my cooking can come to dinner sometime. I told her I'd ask. No pressure, but the invitation stands." Jiwoo found herself smiling as she typed back, "Tell Da-eun I'd be honored. And Hyunwoo, thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like." Over the next few weeks, Jiwoo discovered that losing her company had given her something unexpected: time. Time to rest, to heal, to figure out what came next, and increasingly, time to spend with Hyunwoo and Da-eun. It started with that dinner invitation, Da-eun greeting her at the door with a painting she'd made of what she imagined Ji-woo's favorite flower might be. "I made you a sunflower," Da-eun announced proudly, "because Daddy said you have a bright smile, and sunflowers always look happy." Ji-woo, who'd been told her entire career that she was intimidating, that she had a poker face perfect for boardrooms, found herself genuinely moved by the 8-year-old's perception. Hyunwoo's small apartment above his catering kitchen was nothing like Ji-woo's sprawling house, but it was warm and lived in, filled with Da-eun's artwork and the lingering sense of whatever Hyunwoo had been cooking. Ji-woo watched him move through his small kitchen with the same grace she'd witnessed in her own, noted the way Da-eun helped without being asked, how they worked together like a well-rehearsed dance. "Daddy, can Ji-woo help me with my math homework?" Da-eun asked over dinner, and Ji-woo nearly choked on her kimchi. "Sweetheart, Ji-woo's probably busy," Hyunwoo started, but Ji-woo was already shaking her head. "I'd love to help," she said, and meant it. When was the last time someone had asked her for help with something that wasn't a merger or acquisition? Later, as Da-eun worked through multiplication problems at the kitchen table, Ji-woo found herself genuinely impressed by the child's quick mind and thoughtful questions. "You're really good at this," she told Da-eun, who beamed with pride. "Daddy says I get my smart brain from Mommy, but my stubborn from him." Da-eun's matter-of-fact mention of her mother caught Ji-woo off guard, but she recovered quickly. "That sounds like a good combination," Ji-woo said. "Smart and stubborn can take you far in life." Da-eun nodded seriously. "That's what Daddy says too. He says Mommy would want me to be brave and kind, even when things are hard." The simple wisdom of it, filtered through an 8-year-old's understanding, made Ji-woo's chest tight with emotion. As the weeks turned into months, Ji-woo found herself becoming a regular part of their small family's rhythm. She helped Da-eun with homework, attended her school art shows, learned to make simple Korean dishes under Hyunwoo's patient tutelage. In return, Hyunwoo helped her navigate the complexities of starting over, both professionally and personally. "Have you thought about what you want to do next?" he asked one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. Da-eun was in her room, ostensibly reading but probably painting, given the suspicious silence from upstairs. Ji-woo had been dreading this question, but somehow, coming from Hyunwoo, it didn't feel like pressure. "I've been thinking about consulting," she said slowly, "helping smaller companies, startups, people who can't afford the big firms but need strategic guidance." Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like you, helping people level the playing field." He paused in his dish drying. "Have you thought about where you'd want to do that kind of work?" Ji-woo had been thinking about it, more than she cared to admit. "There's a beautiful space downtown, near Pike Place Market. It's above a cafe, lots of natural light, room for a small team." She'd driven past it dozens of times, had even called about the lease, but something had held her back. "It sounds perfect," Hyunwoo said, and something in his tone made her look at him more closely. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked, and Hyunwoo smiled ruefully. "I may have been looking at spaces in that same area, for a restaurant, not just catering. Da-eun keeps asking when people can come eat Daddy's food without having to plan a party first." Ji-woo felt her heart skip. "Really? In the same neighborhood?" Hyunwoo nodded. "There's this corner space. Used to be a small bistro. It needs work, but it has good bones. And there's an apartment upstairs that would be perfect for Da-eun and me." They looked at each other across the kitchen, both understanding the implications. If they both moved to that neighborhood, they'd be choosing to build their new lives in the same place, to continue whatever this was that had grown between them. "Would that be crazy?" Ji-woo asked quietly. "Making major life decisions based on a friendship that started with a medical emergency?" Hyunwoo set down his dish towel and turned to face her fully. "Ji-woo, what we have isn't just friendship anymore. At least, not for me." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "I know we come from different worlds. I know there are a million practical reasons why this might not work, but I care about you. Da-eun cares about you. We want you in our lives, not just as someone we see occasionally, but as someone who belongs here." Ji-woo felt tears prick her eyes. "I care about you too, both of you, more than I thought possible." She took a shaky breath. "But what if my MS gets worse? What if I have more episodes like that night? What if I become someone you have to take care of, instead of someone who can be a real partner?" Hyunwoo stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. "Ji-woo, the night we met, you weren't weak because you needed help. You were brave because you accepted it. You trusted a stranger with your vulnerability, and that takes more courage than most people have. His thumbs brushed across her knuckles. I'm not looking for someone who never needs help. I'm looking for someone who's not afraid to give it and not too proud to receive it. Is that what you think you found? Jiwoo asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hyunwoo smiled, leaning his forehead against hers. I think I found something even better. I found someone who makes me want to be the best version of myself, someone who makes Da-eun laugh, someone who feels like home. They might have kissed then, might have crossed that final bridge from friendship to something more, but Da-eun's voice called down from upstairs. Daddy! Jiwoo! Come see what I painted! They broke apart, laughing at the interruption, but the moment hung between them, full of promise and possibility. Upstairs, Da-eun had painted a picture of the three of them, standing in front of what looked like a restaurant, all of them holding hands and smiling. It's our future, Da-eun announced proudly. When Daddy gets his restaurant and Jiwoo gets her office, and we all live near each other. Jiwoo stared at the painting, at the way Da-eun had depicted them as a family unit, natural and right. It's beautiful, Da-eun, she said softly. Can I keep it? Da-eun nodded enthusiastically. It's yours. I made it for you because you make Daddy smile the way he used to with Mommy. The simple statement, delivered with a child's straightforward honesty, nearly undid Jiwoo completely. That night, after Hyunwoo had tucked Da-eun into bed, they sat on his small couch, Da-eun's painting propped on the coffee table in front of them. She's right, you know, Hyunwoo said quietly. I haven't felt like myself in years, not since So Young died. But with you, I remember who I used to be, who I could be again. I feel the same way, Jiwoo admitted. For so long, I defined myself by my work, by my success, by being in control. Losing the company felt like losing myself. But these past months with you and Da-eun, I've discovered parts of myself I forgot existed. I'm happier than I've been in years. Hyunwoo reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. So what do we do about it? Jiwoo looked at their joined hands, at Da-eun's painting of their possible future, at this man who'd appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. We take a leap of faith, she said finally. We sign those leases. We build our businesses 6 blocks apart, and we see what happens when two people who care about each other decide to build something together. 6 months later, Jiwoo stood in the window of her new consulting firm, Min Strategic Solutions, watching the morning foot traffic on Pine Street. Her first client meeting was in an hour, a young entrepreneur who needed help scaling her sustainable fashion startup. It was exactly the kind of work Jiwoo had dreamed of doing, using her expertise to help level the playing field for smaller companies. Across the street and down 2 blocks, she could see the warm glow coming from So Young's kitchen, the restaurant Hyunwoo had finally opened. The morning rush was in full swing, office workers grabbing Korean-inspired breakfast sandwiches and coffee, tourists lured in by the incredible smells that seemed to permanently emanate from the building. Jiwoo's phone buzzed with a text from Hyunwoo. Lunch special today is your favorite kimchi jjigae. Da-eun has a half day and wants to do homework at your office if that's okay. She says the light is better for drawing. Jiwoo smiled, typing back. Perfect. I'll pick up sandwiches from you for us. Tell Da-eun I got new colored pencils. The past year hadn't been without challenges. Jiwoo had experienced 2 more MS flare-ups, one mild, one more severe, that had left her using a cane for several weeks. But instead of driving Hyunwoo away, it had only deepened their connection. He'd learned to recognize the early signs of an episode, had researched her condition as thoroughly as any doctor, had advocated for her with medical professionals when she was too tired to fight for herself. In return, Jiwoo had been there. When the restaurant faced its first major crisis, a kitchen fire that could have bankrupted them before they'd even established themselves, she'd used her business connections to expedite repairs, had helped him navigate insurance claims, had worked 16-hour days to make sure So Young's kitchen could reopen within a month. That's what partners do, she'd said when Hyunwoo had tried to thank her. They show up. It was a lesson he'd taught her that first night, and one she'd been learning to live by ever since. Da-eun, now 9 and even more precocious than before, had become the bridge between their 2 worlds in ways neither adult had anticipated. She spent afternoons at Jiwoo's office, doing homework at the conference table, charming clients with her artistry and insight. She worked weekend mornings at the restaurant, greeting customers and helping with simple prep work. proud to be part of the family business. She's lucky to have two strong women as role models, Hyunwoo had said one evening as they watched Da-eun explain to a customer why the kimchi pancakes were her father's best dish. So Young would have loved seeing her so confident. It was one of the many ways Hyunwoo had learned to weave his late wife into their present, honoring her memory while making space for new love. The official conversation about their relationship status had happened on a Tuesday in March, appropriately enough in Ji-woo's kitchen, the same place where Hyunwoo had first taken care of her. They'd been cooking together, an easy routine they developed, when Da-eun had asked innocently, "When are you and Daddy getting married?" The question had hung in the air like the steam from the pot of jjigae they'd been stirring. "What makes you think we're getting married?" Ji-woo had asked carefully, and Da-eun had given her the look that children reserve for particularly slow adults. "Because you love each other, and you live together sometimes, and you take care of each other when you're sick, and Daddy smiles at you the way he used to smile at Mommy in pictures." Da-eun had ticked off each point on her paint-stained fingers. "Plus, Mrs. Min across the hall asked if you were Daddy's girlfriend, and I didn't know what to say." Hyunwoo and Ji-woo had looked at each other over Da-eun's head, both realizing that they'd been avoiding the conversation, not because they didn't know the answer, but because they were afraid to hope for it. "What would you like us to be?" Ji-woo had asked Da-eun seriously, and the little girl had considered this with the gravity it deserved. "I want you to be family," Da-eun had said finally. "Real family, not just people who love each other, but don't live together all the time. I want you to be my bonus mom, and I want Daddy to be your person, and I want us all to live in the same place and eat dinner together every night." She'd paused, then added with devastating honesty, "I miss having a mom, but I don't want Daddy to replace my first mom. I want him to have a new love that's different but still real." It was the wisdom of a child who'd learned early that love isn't finite, that hearts can hold multiple truths simultaneously. Ji-woo had knelt down to Da-eun's eye level, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "I would be honored to be your bonus mom," she'd said solemnly, "and I promise that loving you and your daddy will never mean forgetting how special your first mom was." They'd made it official 6 months later, not with a dramatic proposal, but with a conversation over morning coffee about merging their lives more formally. Hyunwoo had moved into Ji-woo's house, bringing Da-eun's artwork and his grandmother's dishes, and the warm chaos that transforms a house into a home. They'd kept his apartment above the restaurant as office space, and for the nights when late service made the commute impractical. The wedding itself had been small, held in the private dining room at So Young's kitchen, surrounded by the people who'd become their chosen family. Da-eun had been the flower girl and the official witness, her painted sign declaring, "Today, my daddy and Ji-woo become forever family," hanging above the simple altar they'd constructed near the windows overlooking the street where they'd first met. Ji-woo's vows had been simple but profound. "Hyunwoo, you taught me that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about trusting someone to help you back up. You've shown me that love isn't about being perfect for someone, but about being real with them. Thank you for seeing me at my worst and choosing to stay. Thank you for giving me Da-eun, and for letting me give you both my whole heart." Hyunwoo had struggled to get through his own vows without crying. "Ji-woo, the night we met, you thought you were asking for help, but you were actually offering me a gift. The gift of being needed, of being useful, of remembering who I wanted to be. You've made our small family bigger and brighter, and you've taught Da-eun that love multiplies, it doesn't divide. Thank you for choosing us, for staying with us, for building something beautiful from the pieces of our separate stories." Now, 2 years after that rainy October night, Ji-woo's life looked nothing like what she'd planned, and everything like what she'd needed. Her consulting firm was thriving. So Young's kitchen had been written up in 3 national food magazines, and Da-eun was winning art contests and learning to cook recipes her grandmother would have been proud of. Ji-woo's MS remained unpredictable, but it no longer felt like a shadow hanging over her future. She'd learned to manage her symptoms, to plan around her limitations, to ask for help when she needed it. More importantly, she'd learned that her worth wasn't dependent on her ability to control everything, that love didn't require perfection, that sometimes the most beautiful life was the one you built after your original plans fell apart. On in quiet Sunday mornings, when Hyunwoo was making breakfast and Da-eun was painting at the kitchen table, Jiwoo sometimes thought about that terrified woman who'd collapsed on a Seattle sidewalk, begging a stranger not to hurt her. She'd been so afraid that night, afraid of her body, afraid of losing control, afraid of being seen as weak. She could never have imagined that the moment of her greatest vulnerability would become the doorway to her greatest joy, that the man who'd knelt beside her in the rain would become her partner in everything, that the little girl who'd lost her mother would choose Jiwoo to help fill that space in her heart, that a family born from loss and bound by choice could be stronger than any biological connection. "Penny for your thoughts," Hyunwoo said, appearing behind her with a cup of coffee prepared exactly the way she liked it. Da-yoon was at the kitchen table, working on a painting of their restaurant, her tongue poking out in concentration the way it always did when she was focused. "Just thinking about how we got here," Jiwoo said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "About how the worst night of my life turned into the beginning of the best chapter." Hyunwoo wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together looking out at the neighborhood they'd built their life in, watching the early morning bustle of people starting their days. "Do you ever regret it?" Hyunwoo asked quietly. "Giving up the corporate world, the prestige, the power?" Jiwoo leaned back against his chest, solid and warm and reassuringly present. "Never," she said without hesitation. "I spent 20 years building an empire that could be taken away in a single meeting. But this, what we've built together, no one can take this away from us." Da-eun looked up from her painting, her face bright with the satisfaction of creative work. "Jiwoo, can you help me with the sign for the restaurant? I want to make sure the letters are straight." Jiwoo settled beside her at the table, studying the careful details Da-eun had included, the tiny figures she'd painted in the windows that looked remarkably like their family. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Jiwoo said, helping Da-eun add the final details to So-young's kitchen sign. "Your mom would be so proud of this painting and of how well you've been taking care of your dad." Da-eun smiled, the guileless joy of a child who felt secure in love. "She is proud," Da-eun said matter-of-factly. "I can feel it sometimes when we're all together. She's happy that Daddy's happy again." It was moments like these that reminded Jiwoo that their family was built on a foundation of honesty about loss, about the way love can coexist with grief, about how healing doesn't mean forgetting. They'd created space for So-young's memory in their daily life, not as a shadow over their happiness, but as a reminder of how precious and fragile love could be. That evening, as they closed the restaurant, together, Jiwoo watched Hyunwoo teach Da-eun how to properly clean the grill, their heads bent together over the industrial appliances, both of them serious about the work. It struck her again how much this man had given her, not just love, but purpose, belonging, a place in the world that felt right. "Ready to go home?" Hyunwoo asked, hanging up his apron and switching off the last of the lights. Da-eun was already at the door, her backpack full of homework and her latest painting carefully rolled in a tube. "Ready?" Jiwoo said, and realized that the word had never meant more to her than it did now. Home wasn't the big house in Medina anymore, though they still lived there. Home was wherever the three of them were together. Whether it was the restaurant kitchen at closing time, the breakfast table on Sunday mornings, or the living room couch where they watched Da-eun's favorite movies and argued good-naturedly about what to order for dinner. As they walked to the car, Da-eun skipping ahead, Hyunwoo reached for Jiwoo's hand, their fingers intertwining automatically. "Thank you," he said quietly, and Jiwoo squeezed his hand in response. "For what?" she asked, though she thought she knew. "For staying," Hyunwoo said simply. "For choosing us every day, for making Da-eun feel like she has a complete family again, for teaching me that it's okay to love someone new without betraying the memory of someone old." They'd reached the car, but neither of them made a move to get in, both content to stand in the warm circle of the streetlight, holding hands and watching Da-eun practice the hopscotch pattern someone had chalked on the sidewalk. "Thank you for seeing me," Jiwoo replied, "for helping me figure out who I wanted to be when I wasn't defined by my job title, for showing me that love doesn't require perfection, just presence." She paused, watching Da-eun's careful concentration as she navigated the numbered squares. "For giving me the family I never knew I needed." Later that night, after Da-eun had been tucked into bed with a new book and a glass of water, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, Jiwoo and Hyunwoo sat on their back deck, looking out over the lake. It was a ritual they'd developed, these quiet moments at the end of each day, a chance to decompress and connect without the cheerful chaos that defined most of their waking hours. Da-yoon asked me something interesting today, Hyunwoo said, settling into the chair beside Ji-woo's. She wanted to know if we were going to have more kids, if she'd get to be a big sister. Ji-woo felt her heart skip, not with anxiety, but with possibility. They'd discussed it theoretically, but Da-yoon's direct question had brought it into sharp focus. What did you tell her? Ji-woo asked, and Hyunwoo smiled. I told her that was a decision all three of us would make together when the time felt right, but that she'd be an amazing big sister if that's what our family decided. He paused, studying Ji-woo's face in the soft deck lighting. How do you feel about that? The possibility of more kids? Ji-woo thought about it seriously, considering not just her desires, but the practical realities of her condition, the demands of their businesses, the complexity of blending their already full lives. I think, she said slowly, that if we're blessed enough to have that choice, I'd like Da-yoon to have a sibling. I'd like to give you the chance to be a dad to a baby again, to have those experiences that were cut short before. Hyunwoo reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. And I'd like to give you the chance to experience pregnancy and birth, if that's what you want, if your doctors think it's safe. They sat in comfortable silence, both imagining the possibilities, the ways their family might continue to grow and change. Whatever happens, Ji-woo said finally, I'm grateful for this life we've built, for Da-eun, for the restaurant, for my work, for you. 5 years ago, if someone had told me this would be my life, I wouldn't have believed them. Hyunwoo lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. The best things are usually the ones we can't plan for, he said, the ones that find us when we're not looking. As they made their way inside, turning off lights and checking that Da-eun was still sleeping peacefully, Ji-woo reflected on the truth of that statement. She'd spent her 20s and 30s planning every detail of her professional life, building strategies and 5-year projections, trying to control every variable. But the thing that had brought her the greatest happiness had come from a moment of complete powerlessness, from accepting help when she needed it most. She thought about the woman she'd been that rainy October night, desperate and afraid, convinced that needing help made her weak. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, couldn't have conceived of a love that was strengthened rather than diminished by vulnerability, of a family built on choice rather than blood, of a career that felt like service rather than conquest. In the bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth beside Hyunwoo in the easy intimacy of long-term partnership, Ji-woo caught sight of her reflection and smiled. She looked older than she had 5 years ago, but also somehow younger, the lines around her eyes coming from laughter rather than stress, her expression softer and more open. She looked like someone who was loved, who belonged somewhere, who had found her place in the world. What are you smiling about? Hyunwoo asked, catching her reflection in the mirror. Just thinking about how happy I am, Ji-woo said simply. How grateful I am for everything, even the hard parts that brought us together. Hyunwoo smiled back, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Even the MS? He asked gently. Ji-woo considered this seriously. It would be easy to say yes, to romanticize the condition that had, in a roundabout way, brought them together. But she'd learned to be honest about the challenges, to acknowledge the real difficulties without diminishing the genuine joys. I'm grateful for what it taught me, she said finally, about accepting help, about not having to be strong all the time, about finding strength in community instead of just in independence, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone. That's my wise woman, Hyunwoo said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Always honest, even when it's complicated. They finished their bedtime routine in comfortable silence, both tired from the long day, but content in the way that comes from work well done and love well lived. In bed, Ji-woo curled against Hyunwoo's side, listening to his heartbeat slow as he drifted towards sleep. Through the slightly open window, she could hear the distant sounds of the city, the occasional car passing on the wet streets, the soft patter of rain that had started during dinner. It was a sound that would always remind her of beginnings, of the night when her old life ended and her real life began. I love you, she whispered into the darkness, and felt Hyunwoo's arms tighten around her in response. I love you too, he murmured back, his voice thick with approaching sleep. Both of you, all of us. It was the last thing Ji-woo heard before sleep claimed her. and she drifted off thinking about tomorrow, about the breakfast Hyunwoo would make, about the painting Da-eun would finish, about the clients she would help, about the small, precious rituals that made up a life well lived. In her dreams, she was running through rain-slicked streets, but this time, she wasn't running away from anything. She was running toward something, toward home, toward love, toward the family that was waiting for her at the end of every difficult day. And in her dreams, her legs were strong and sure, carrying her exactly where she needed to go. The next morning brought the first snow of the season, fat flakes that turned the city into a winter wonderland by the time Da-eun woke up. Ji-woo watched from the kitchen window as Hyunwoo taught Da-eun how to catch snowflakes on her tongue in the backyard, both of them laughing as they tilted their faces to the sky. "Come out here," Da-eun called, spotting Ji-woo at the window. "The snow tastes like possibilities." It was such a perfectly Da-eun thing to say, poetic and whimsical and somehow exactly right. Ji-woo grabbed her coat and joined them in the backyard, letting Hyunwoo wrap his arms around her as they watched Da-eun spin in circles, her arms outstretched, catching snowflakes and declaring each one special. "This is it," Ji-woo thought, standing in her backyard with snow in her hair and the two people she loved most in the world. This is everything. Not the corner office or the magazine covers or the board meetings that had once defined her worth. Not the perfect body or the predictable future she'd once thought she needed. Just this moment, this family, this choice to keep showing up for love, even when it was complicated, even when it required courage, even when it meant admitting that the best things in life were the ones you couldn't control. The snow continued to fall as they headed inside for breakfast, covering the city in a blanket of fresh possibility. And Ji-woo Min, former CEO turned consultant, bonus mom turned beloved partner, woman who'd once begged a stranger not to hurt her, walked into her warm kitchen surrounded by the people who'd chosen to love her exactly as she was, snowflakes melting in her hair like tiny blessings, ready to begin another day in the beautiful, imperfect, absolutely perfect life they'd built together from courage, kindness, and the revolutionary act of asking for help when you need it most. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you that our most vulnerable moments can become our greatest strengths, that love finds us in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes falling down is just the first step toward standing up stronger than before, please don't just watch and walk away. Hit that subscribe button and join our Everbell Stories family, where we believe that every ending is actually a beginning, that every stranger might be an angel in disguise, and that every act of kindness creates ripples that change the world in ways we may never know. Because Ji-woo's story isn't just about finding love after loss. It's about finding yourself in the act of accepting help, of choosing vulnerability, of believing that you deserve kindness even when the world has been cruel. Your story is still being written. Your Tuesday at the coffee shop is still coming. Your Hyunwoo is still out there learning to cook the dishes that will heal your heart. Don't give up. Don't stop believing. And remember that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, the ones we build from broken pieces and brave hearts, and the revolutionary idea that love multiplies. It never divides. See you in the next story, friends. Until then, keep believing in the magic of ordinary Tuesdays, in the power of strangers who become family, and in the truth that you are exactly enough, exactly as you are, for the love that's looking for you.